The FA Cup, massive, massive game. And I don't know if it's a massive game because it stops City winning the treble or if it's a massive game because it's the FA Cup. The FA Cup is one of my favourite cup competitions in world football. And Manchester United should be the team that's won it the most. And we were at one point, and Arsenal recently overtook us, and we need to go and get that mantle back. What stands in our way is probably the best team in the world, unfortunately, at the moment. Now, it is the best team in the world that we have managed to beat at home, but got our asses handed to us away. It is a sizable task that awaits us. The situation coming into the game is obviously United secured third place in the Premier League. We won our last 4 games in a row in the lead up to this game. Confidence at the club is good. Martinez being out is a major concern. Anthony, not sure he would have started in this game anyway, but obviously it'd be probably better to have him in the squad than not. But otherwise, we're in a fairly decent place. We're going to represent ourselves as best we can, I think. Except for the semi-final, which obviously we had to win on penalties. United have won all the 4 other cup matches by 3-1, weirdly. And we've already won silverware at Wembley this season against a difficult team that don't really give you a lot. Beating Newcastle in February for the League Cup. We have won only 2 of our last 5 finals at Wembley, winning the competition last in 2016. It was a good day out. This feels like United are coming into it as a massive, massive underdog. And this is the first of the FA Cup finals that's been a Manchester derby. Obviously, City are looking to secure the domestic double and then go on and try and add the Champions League to that. United are looking to stop them as much as we are looking to complete a domestic cup double. And it'd be interesting to see how much the Champions League plays into City's mentality coming into this. Are there some players who go, do you know what, maybe I'm going to try and get through this at 80% today because I don't want to miss the Champions League final? If Pep's got the right sort of stuff about him, he uses this to say, boys, if you want to play in the Champions League final, I need 110%. Go wipe the floor with United and book yourself a spot in the first 11 for the game next weekend. That is what I think he should be doing. Whether or not that's what he actually does is to be seen, isn't it? City yet to concede a goal in this year's FA Cup. And there's only 2 teams that have won it, that have done that without conceding a goal. Preston North End did it in 1889 and Bury did it in 1903. With us having already won the League Cup against Newcastle this season, we are looking to win both major domestic cup competitions in a single season for the first time. We've never done it before. But we would be the 5th different side to do this overall, should we achieve it. I'm going to go into a little bit how City have evolved their style of play this season because I think it's very interesting and I think it's going to tie into what Manchester United need to do to win the game. Now, the success that City have had under Pep has got many fathers, including the untold amount of money that they've spent and the privilege that Pep has had as a manager to be able to replace players that he bought that didn't work. But he still had to develop a possession style of football that there were many people didn't think could be done in England. And he's done it. So he gets a lot of credit for doing that. How revolutionary it is, well, I think you got to go and speak to Rinus Michels and Johan Cruyff about that because Guardiola's just following on from their lead, in my opinion anyway. Now, positional play is the foundation of his possession-based tiki-taka. And he has used positioning, possession, and pressing as the tools to sort of maintain control and dominate the opposition. And he does this very well, to his credit. Now, from what will be on the BBC written as a 4-3-3, will look more like a 2-3-5 or a 3-2-5 in actuality once it's on the pitch, once they're in possession. And Guardiola's actually become more and more adaptive over the years. He's tweaked and changed it probably not every single season, but it seems like there's something different that he's done every single season to arrive at the sort of state that you find Manchester City playing with now. And that's either to counter specific weaknesses of either a single opponent or something that Manchester City's style, because it's so, what's the word I'm looking for? Distinct. It's watched by a lot of people and analysed by a lot of people. And because there's such a structure to it, it can be emulated by people. Maybe not to the same level, but you do see people emulating it. And when something gets emulated or studied to the level that I think Pep's system is getting at Manchester City, there is a requirement to continually keep adapting it. Otherwise, you become very obvious. And the weaknesses in Pep's system for years were exploit them using wide players on the counter-attack because of where the fullbacks start to push up. Now, he has adapted things, and that's no longer the same weakness that it once was. That's not to say that there isn't still weaknesses within the system, but it's not quite the same. So just doshing it into the channel in behind the fullbacks who push really high up isn't necessarily going to work the same way it always has done. In today's game, the speed of transition from defence to attack is more important than ever, because there's been such this overwhelming emphasis placed on maintaining possession, and the number of passes allowed per defensive action is increasing constantly, certainly within Pep Guardiola's teams, that when you get the opportunity to receive and win the ball, City, particularly, as we saw with an early Barcelona iteration, are in an excellent position to counter-press, and they do so because they've been in possession for the ball so long that they're quite relaxed. So when they do, they're able to up the tempo, attempt to win the ball. But if you can break that, transition on them quickly, there are places that you can exploit. And absolute pace is dangerous no matter how good your opposition is. And you can only beat pace with pace. It doesn't matter how good your positioning is. You could put Laurent Blanc out there, yeah? He's going to get destroyed, but he's one of the most positionally astute defenders the world has ever seen. He's going to get destroyed because someone's just quicker than him, which is why having Kyle Walker in the Manchester City team, which isn't necessarily what he'll do this weekend, is an enormous asset. Now, there's not a lot of time to sort of shift from an in-possession shape to an out-of-possession shape if it's massively different and players need to cut across 25 metres somewhere to go and get where they need to be. You're talking a couple of seconds to get into the correct position, or you ain't going to do it. It's as simple as that. So Pep, other managers have all tried to sort of find the ideal solution that maintains a numerical superiority across the middle of the pitch, but also defending the zones of the channels where they're likely to be attacked in the transition. Now, that's where City's 3-2-5 or 3-2-4-1, which is probably more realistically what it is. And rather than keeping the two centre-backs at the back, pushing the wing-backs forward and into the final third, it's only really Ruben Dias that holds position at the back, with Ake and Akanji sort of adopting traditional full-back roles. And there's, for those people who watched what Pep actually played in, and what we saw with Johan Cruyff trying to create a 3-diamond-3, there's serious similarities between the 3-diamond-3 that Barcelona under Johan Cruyff, that Guardiola played in, and what Manchester City are currently trying to do. And there's a lot of similarities between, not necessarily put in the same position, but I think Pep, for John Stones, is an excellent mentor because of the sorts of things that Pep was asked to do in that Barcelona team. But anyway, so the shape in many ways does reflect both what we saw at Ajax and at Barcelona with the 3-4-3 or the 3-diamond-3, at least in the shape at the back. It's a little bit different up front. When Johan played in the 9, he played in the 9 and at the tip of the diamond, and actually on the left. It didn't look like what Haaland is doing for obvious reasons. But in practice, the team does defend with 4 defenders. When they're in possession, Ruben Dias is the one that goes one-to-one with an opposing forward. Very difficult to do, very brave to do, but he's the one that's going to try and play 1v1 against the opposition number 9. Now, as Diaz remains central, and he's going to look to try and protect that sort of central channel of the pitch, Rodri will hold his position in front of that sort of wide back three and sit just that little bit off, and Stones will close with him and connect with him. To the left, you'll probably see Gundogan keep himself to that sort of left half space, Gundogan over to the right half space, and then obviously you're going to have Haaland as a pressing forward who occasionally drops deep in the build-up. The position of the 3 midfield is very similar to how a team would operate in a 4-3-3. So it's not too wild in terms of the sort of makeup, and it's not too much adaptation for the players to wrap their heads around it. You have one runner, you have one playmaker, and you have one who's going to be more happy to sit deep. And they all have a slightly different sort of role, and it blends nicely together in a thing. The main difference here is the role of John Stones, because the role of John Stones is what makes this totally different to something that we've seen certainly in English football, and maybe something that is uniquely Pep Guardiola about this team. So the Stones role is really, really interesting because it's rather new. It isn't the same as what we've seen previously. With the traditional sort of 3-2-5 shape that we see, what's happened is the centre-halves have split and the 6 has come in between the 2 other centre-halves to just make an auxiliary centre-half, and then the other 2 midfielders are the 2, while your full-backs and your forward 3 are the forward 5. But that's not what they're doing here. As we mentioned, this has got a lot of similarities between what we saw Pep doing with with Barcelona and Johan Cruyff did with Barcelona and with Ajax. Pep obviously played in it, not what he did when he was manager. And it's a role, pretty much called the libero. That's what John Stones is sort of doing at the moment, and it's tactically fascinating. Now, when a team's in possession of the ball, John Stones and Rodri seem to sort of operate in the middle of the pitch and play close together, and they almost play a bit like a partnership, rather than him being a partnership with Ruben Diaz. And he is a ball-playing defender, but he gets a hell of a lot of freedom to be able to play on the ball at the moment as well. Now, as we said, Rodri's largely going to stay in the centre of the park, but he can also move into the left half space. John Stones is responsible for holding the position and then also maybe covering slightly over to the right half space. And the position of this double pivot has seen City create this really, really strong defensive block that's actually generally really, really hard for people to penetrate through the middle because it's got numerical superiority in the middle of the park. And the rotation of Rodri and Stones, because they can both play and because they've got both of them have got good sort of defensive reading of the game, makes this a really, really formidable sort of duo that they're sticking in the mix there. Stones has become absolutely vital to Manchester City because as teams try to defend against City, you'll invariably see teams try and sit back. And I'm not sure sitting back is the best method to try and defeat Manchester City. You've seen teams that have had the most success. Realistically, the kryptonite for City has been Liverpool over the last few years. Not just because they've been able to go toe-to-toe with them in the league, but when they actually get on the pitch together, that's the team that generally tends to have the best of the Manchester City and whoever games. And I think part of the reason is because they get in their face and they get up high and they try and make them play quick over the top rather than allowing them to have the ball and to build up. But it takes a hell of a brave manager to do that and a hell of a brave skill set within the 11 to be able to manage that. And I'm not sure Manchester United are good enough yet to go and play in City's half and try and win the ball off them right there, even though that's probably what you need to go and do. Now, there was a point I was trying to make here. The point I was trying to make is when you see teams sit back, now what they'll do, you've got a couple of options. You can mid-block and try and man-mark. You can low-block and try and deny space. And the denial of space usually is for the 5 forwards and that 2 in midfield. What you'll then see is the opposition forward will go and sit right on Rodri's toes and try and stop him playing. And that has been something that we've seen in the past be quite effective in stopping Manchester City play. You man-mark the midfielders, you man-mark the back line, you put your number 9 on the number 6, whether it's been Rodri or Fernandinho in the past, and you can stop Manchester City playing. What they've done now with this iteration by pushing John Stones up there is they've just fucking taken away your main tool in terms of stopping them play. John Stones has become absolutely vital because they now start to build up through him. And if you can't build up through him, they're building up through Rodri. And no one's yet figured out how to stop both of them doing this. And I don't think we'll be able to do this tomorrow. I think it's going to be a case of we're just going to have to try and cope with it the best we can. But what they're excellent at doing is switching the play, but also putting line-breaking passes and finding the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva in space, and beating the defensive block with, direct, high-quality footballs right through the centre of a team. And because there's two of them, it sort of breaks what seems like a very straightforward pattern to try and block, because you've now got 2 points of attack, and it's shifted the angle of the attack. And if you've got Rodri in possession and you think you've cut off the passing lanes behind you because you've dealt with what Rodri's going to do, then what happens is he just knocks it, a bit of an angle, out to the side for John Stones, and he's actually got that line right the way through. Bastard. So that, plus elite rotations, plus the fact that they've had this drilled into them now for absolutely years, means it's a fucking nightmare to try and deal with. When the opposition have possession, the team then have to transition in a defensive phase. John Stones does move back into defence. It forms a traditional back four, and that's where the defensive principles, whether you're playing at my level or whether you're playing for Manchester City, are the same. The first rule of defending is delay. And if you can get out there, you can stop. Think about what Manchester United are probably going to try and do, right? They're probably trying to get Bruno or Christian Eriksen or Casemiro on the ball, and they're probably going to try and release Marcus Rashford. Now, if you as a Manchester City player lose the ball in the middle or the final third, your first thought is probably going to be tactical foul, stop the quick transition. After that, it's going to be stay on your feet, stay in the way, and stop that quick, direct ball either through or over the defence and stop the run of Marcus Rashford. That's what Manchester City are going to focus on. And this is the problem that United face. Because I can sit here now and I can explain to you how Manchester City are going to play, but I can't explain to you how you effectively stop them. They've probably got 4 or 5 genuine, serious, high-quality threats that are going to stop Manchester United. United need to be lucky and play whack-a-mole to try and stop all of those different threats at once. And we're probably not going to be able to do that. Manchester United have probably got, realistically, one major opportunity to score a goal here. I think Bruno's got capability of being able to pull something out, especially with some of the ways his late runs have been going, and he'll probably be playing 1-1. So there is opportunities there. We know he's one of the most creative players in the league. If they don't respect that, that could hurt them. Marcus Rashford's blistering pace is a problem. You got to keep it away from Kyle Walker if they decide to play Kyle Walker at fullback rather than Akanji. But if they play Kyle Walker, you need to try and find the spot where John Stones has stepped up, and that little bit, because Stones is nowhere near as quick as Marcus Rashford. If Rashford can just hang out around the back of John Stones, and if United can get the balls transitioned forward with a bit of quality on them, that will be the point where Manchester City's defence can be broken. You can't go 1v1 against Kyle Walker because he's like some sort of fucking cheat code, and putting Rashford against Kyle Walker will just eliminate United's best asset, and then we are really going to struggle. It's going to be a long day for us. But there is a weakness in the transition backwards from Stones getting into the right position. So if City do not manage to delay us and we can play around it and get the ball forward quickly, we can open them up there. The problem with this entire game is that's United's one play. That's the one card we've got in our pocket. In the meantime, we've got to try and deal with Erling Haaland, Bernardo Silva, Jack Grealish, although I think that Wan-Bissaka could lock him up. Kevin De Bruyne, if I've not mentioned him. And actually, the player that I think is doing an absolute madness for them at the moment is Gundogan. All of them are capable of scoring goals. All of them are capable of hurting Manchester United. And all of them are capable of winning this match for Manchester City. We're relying on 2 or 3 or 4 players to have a bad day and us to have everything going right. I don't anticipate a United victory in this. And that hurts to say. But there you go. That's what John Stones is going to bring. And then ahead of that, what it allows them to do is to create a bit of a box midfield. So the position of Stones and Rodri creates a double pivot. that creates, we have something similar at Paddock where I call it a security square. And I'm doing it for a different reason. I'm doing it to try and have bodies in a certain area so we can delay the opposition getting the ball forward, because we face a lot of teams that are going to play long ball, but it also gives me a nice little structure. So we kind of encircle the opposition number 9 and isolate him just a little bit. Now, City are doing it for a different reason. They're doing it so they've got multiple options on the ball at all times. So they've got the double pivot at the back line, which is Stones and Rodri, and then ahead of them you're going to have Gundogan and Kevin De Bruyne, giving them diagonals and angles all over the show. So that 4 can begin to dominate the ball. And if you look at the pass maps of where Manchester City are playing, they will just happily sit there, boring the piss out of everyone, knocking that ball between the 4 of them. And they'll wait for someone to get bored, make a mistake, jump out of position, and then punish you. So the advantages of what they're doing with that little square in midfield, it gives them triangles, and it gives them passing options. It gives them a ton of angles. It could almost look like a 3-2-2-3, which is a little bit like the WM that Matt Busby played, but it's not quite. But it gives them so many angles, so many diamonds, so many triangles. It's just like, with a little bit of movement, a little bit of rotation, it's an amazing tool for a possession-orientated system. And it gives them so many options on the ball. The one thing that it can do occasionally, if you can repel it a little bit, is it can mean that the striker ends up being a little bit isolated if you can keep them outside of your box. And the nightmare is, if they do get into your box, you've got 2 inside runners then from the 2 sort of forward 8s. And that's why you see Kevin De Bruyne getting his shots away, and why you see Gundogan getting shots away, because they'll creep up, and before you know it, they're your inside runners. And how are you going to deal with these fuckers? It gives them overloads by movement. It gives them a ton of options. It gives them nice short passes as well, so they can play off 1 if they have to, play on 2 if they're trying to keep it a little bit safer. They're good enough to do that for an entire 90 minutes. It gives the freedom, because those 2 central midfielders, Gundogan and De Bruyne, can take a risk. They can bomb forward into the box and not have to worry about, oh, is someone going to cover me? What happens if we get broke on? Dealt with that. Don't worry about it. There's 5 people sitting back waiting to defend. You guys go and get forward and go and make things happen. And Gundogan has got a real knack of ghosting into the right place and getting things done. He gets into weird spots, in behind defensive lines. He doesn't get picked up, and he punishes people. And then Kevin De Bruyne doesn't do it the same way he does it, but Kevin De Bruyne's then going to be making a final ball for somebody else inside the box, and we know how good Kevin De Bruyne is at doing that. So it's a better attacking structure, and it's a better defensive structure. And with the movement that you get from the 2 number 8s pushed up either side of the forward, once they get into the box, there is no isolation. If you can keep them away, if you can sort of deny a little bit of space, they'll come deep and they'll get bored and they'll try and get on the ball. And that's where you can sort of prevent City a little bit. But once they get into the box, oh, you're fucked. It's as simple as that. So the attacking structure is able to pin a team back. And that's why I say I think the best option would be to try and do what Liverpool do, get in their faces and keep them in their half. But it's a ballsy call. Most teams are going to try and sit back and try and block up that space, trying to repel those 8s, push them further back. But if they end up doing the overload, getting an overload in there, them 2 8s are going to, underlap into the box, and then you're in all sorts of shit. And it's generally what it's going to force is, you've got your forward 3, 2 wingers. We know that Pep likes them at least to start very wide, with a striker, and then 2 very attacking 8s that are like number 10s in many ways, that they'll get into the box. That gives you the pressure of having 5 go up against generally 4. So what does that require from you as a defending team? It requires your number 6 to come back, and it requires somebody else. So for Manchester United playing a 4-2-3-1, what's going to happen is if they do it correctly, and what United need to prevent from happening is our midfield 2 and our back 4 will completely compress, go man for man, and it'll just be a big fucking line of 10 people, and then it'll be about movement and VAR and, was he onside, was he offside as a cross comes in. And that's extremely, extremely dangerous. United want to push them away, deny them the opportunity to get onto our back line, but that's what you'll end up having to do. They'll push those players up, so you end up going back because, the first rule of defending is to deny, but the main defensive principle is +1. So you've got to have 1 more defender than they've got attackers. And that's going to require you to drop your 2 midfield 6s in to deal with the 2 8s that are trying to run in beyond. And that's how Manchester City crush a team, because you can't leave them free. So you've got to try and keep forcing the line up, give yourself a little bit of depth, try and keep your 6s as high as possible, watch them 2 guys, push them back, because if you start letting them running in behind you, they've overloaded you, and it's going to be 1-0 before you know it. And like I said, the attacking structure of 5 forwards versus a back 4 means that someone's free, unless you're going to have to work very, very hard to do that. And it forces the opposition teams to be way more compact. And when they start getting compact left to right, it means there's space on the wings, so they can keep horseshoeing it around, finding the space. And as soon as you start looking for runs in beyond, it's going to compress them down. And then you're just looking for a little bit of time in and a through ball in behind, beat the offside trap, and Bosch are going to be getting shots on. But the real benefit of the attacking structure is the increased probability of retaining possession, because as they push all of those guys back, that leaves them with 3 or 4 forwards to be running around, as 5, 6, 7 players are going to be looking to just pass it around them. And that's why you end up with people getting absolutely dusted. Now, in the final third, nothing's really changed here, to be honest, since he came. The wingers stay high and wide. They stand right on the white of the touchline. They get chalk on their boots. And the position at the wingers seems to be all about almost looking for a bounce pass. It's changed a little bit with Grealish, and Mahrez sometimes doesn't quite stick to this. But what they're looking for their wingers is almost just a bounce option while someone underlaps and creates a little bit of space and drags someone out. Now, if they can beat their man 1v1, and that's why Wan-Bissaka's got to come in, if they can beat their man 1v1, there's always space. Because now, what was always going to be tough anyway, because we're only +1 in the back line, if someone gets beat by a dribbler, now you're not got your +1, and someone else is going to have to go out, which means, if let's say it's Jack Grealish beats Wan-Bissaka, I don't think he will, but if he does beat Wan-Bissaka, now my right side centre-half or my right side number 6 needs to go out and deal with him, and that's either just left Gundogan free or Haaland free in the box, and that's a very, very bad idea. So, yeah, we're in all sorts of shit, lads. Still going down, but I'm not very hopeful. Anyway, starting 11-wise, I reckon City are going to line up something like this. And the star man, despite the fact that he's just the guy that puts it in the back of the net in this system, it's Erling Haaland. He ended the campaign in the league with 36 goals, which is a Premier League record for a single season. And that's really kind of gone under the radar because he started off so bright and it kind of fizzled a little bit. It's not really been spoke about. But it's not out of the realms for him to hit 40 in the league. I think he's well capable of doing that. He's on 52 goals from 51 appearances in all competitions so far this season. It's the greatest goal-scoring campaign by a player at a Premier League club in a single season. It surpassed Mo Salah's. It surpassed Ruud van Nistelrooy's. It surpassed what Cristiano Ronaldo did. He's a fucking cyborg. And he's an absolute handful. He's sharp. He can run in behind, although not sure how often we're going to see him do that on Saturday, but he can finish with his left, his right, his head. The guy just scores goals. And it's been funny as do Manchester City have as much control as they used to have? No, they fucking don't. They used to play 6 midfielders rather than have an Erling Haaland character up top. They didn't used to have... They played with a false 9. They played with someone that was going to come deep and allow them to maintain possession. But it's not about maintaining possession. It's about scoring fucking goals. And Erling Haaland scored 52 of them. Are they better with Erling Haaland? Yeah, they're better with him. Because they win more fucking games. So, do they have more possession? No. Does it matter? No. Shut up. He makes them better. He's a fucking nightmare. In terms of the United team, Wan-Bissaka right back, Luke Shaw left back, Lindelof and Varane, big fucking game for you two. Eriksen and Casemiro and Fred in the 10. We are going to need legs in the centre of the park. It might actually look like Eriksen's a little bit higher up and Fred's a little bit deeper, and that'll change when we get on the ball. You want Fred coming collecting the ball from De Gea, but you're going to need Fred's legs in there. Simple. There's no argument about it. Fred might even be one of the first names on the team sheet. He generally steps up and performs against City, as does McTominay, to be fair to him. But I don't think he's getting a sniff. I think it's going to be Fred. Bruno goes on the right side. because you're going to want his energy and work rate to sort of help doubling up in the middle. And fuck Ake in possession. He can come inside and he can help us overload the centre of the park, and he can be someone that's a little bit more free that we can find, get the ball to, and see if he can find Marcus in behind. Like I said, we're going to look for Marcus trying to get in behind that little gap where Stones has left, and maybe can he drag Diaz off to one side a little bit, maybe talk some shit to him, see if Diaz can come over to him and see if you can get a 2v1 on Diaz very, very quickly, with Marcus Rashford being the other one. And that could be a very effective sort of thing for Manchester United. Unfortunately, it's probably our only fucking move. There isn't really a lot of other moves that I think United have got in the locker that make a lot of sense here. So it's looking about where can we isolate Marcus Rashford and get him in behind, because that's where we're going to do the most damage. And he's our star man. You know, his pace and his ability to take players out of the game is literally City's kryptonite. So he's got to play. He will get an opportunity. Can he be clinical and put it in? Are Manchester United going to play on the counter-attack in this game? You better fucking believe we are, yeah. And his confidence is pretty high right now. When he's at his best, you know, he can unlock the door and he can keep City players. He can worry them, to be fair. And that might throw them a little bit. He is the best chance, the best outlet, and he's also a big game player. So we are going to put the fucking house on Marcus Rashford making this one. So how do we beat them? So as I mentioned, you're looking for the sort of right-sided centre-half area. That's where Rashford can sort of get in behind where John Stones is. It's a massive weakness for him. Get in behind where John Stones is, because he's got a big job to do in possession. You might be able to get him switched off on the defensive transition if he creeps a little bit too high with the ball. United might even allow him more time on the ball and decide not to press him, because it might venture him up the pitch. And if he hasn't got passing options but he's got the opportunity to drive, that might be a move. And maybe there's a pressing trigger that actually, if he gets 10-15 yards ahead of where he's meant to be, you step in and you press him to see if you can turn the ball around there and get it in behind him. That might be something that United need to go for. And then try and stop De Bruyne passing it to Haaland by any means, fair or foul. That might mean Casemiro goes on him, which might mean that Eriksen has to try and line up against Gundogan. It ain't a good fit either way round, lads. It really ain't. Unless you're going to say, fuck it, we'll put Eriksen on Rodri, and it ain't going to be the prettiest thing, but at least Fred can get in and cut about on De Bruyne and maybe put a foot in and stop him doing anything. Oh, we're in for a long day, aren't we? Anyway, that might be the longest preview that I've ever done, but I hope you enjoyed the work. Let me know in the comments below. How confident are you feeling ahead of this game? Because honestly, I'm not. See you in the next one. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.